A friend of mine introduced me to this girl named Crystal while I was in Seoul. She's a journalist and she's written for some really cool publications. So I set up a meeting with her at a coffee shop. And earlier in the day, Alex and I were eating lunch together at a Korean barbecue spot that happened to be delicious. And I know that he wanted to go shopping after, so I offered to do what any good friend would do, take his hard case. As we broke off and went our separate ways, I rolled the case over to the coffee shop. And it was a pretty good meeting, to be honest. Like, Crystal's really cool, really articulate, and we started talking a bit about how Asian culture is so enamored with fashion, right? And as we started getting really deep into things, I kept checking my watch. I was like, oh man, I have to go to this interview with Jay Park. So Jay Park is a Korean artist who just got signed to Roc Nation, and he's hoping to sort of break into the American market, or the Western world, I should say, even though he's originally from the US. So I kept checking my watch every so often. I was like, oh man, like, I don't want to be late. I want to make sure I'm as professional as possible. I'm sure his time's very valuable. So eventually we kind of closed down the conversation. The coffee shop was on a back street. We walked to one of the main sort of shopping streets. And for whatever reason, like, despite how busy the street is, we couldn't get a cab. And, I must have waited like 5-10 minutes, and this was kind of cutting into my travel time, etc. Eventually I got a cab. I threw Alex's case into the back, and Crystal kind of conversed with the taxi driver and was saying, oh yeah, this is where he needs to go. He punched in the GPS and we took off. We took our first right turn off the street and we hit traffic. And by that time, it was this light sprinkle of rain started to pick up, and we were essentially at a standstill. And I started getting really anxious. I was like, man, like, I hope I'm not late. Generally, when you're traveling, you want to cram as many things as you can into your itinerary. So I just got to a point where I was just dozing, like, in and out of consciousness, and trying to just stay focused at the same time. Eventually, we made it there. I was early in regards to the original meeting time of 4 p.m., but I was late in the sense that he had already arrived, and that's exactly what I didn't want to happen. So I put down exact change and kind of rushed out of the cab. It started to rain a bit harder, so I was like, just trying to get indoors as fast as possible. There was kind of this awkward moment of exchanging sort of, hey, what's up? How's it going? And then immediately he was asking,
oh, this is not going to take long, is it?
And generally that's a warning sign, right? It's, like, you're on a timeline, right? And this compounded the fact that, I wanted to make sure things went smoothly. So we got ushered into this private room in the back of the cafe. It's like glass doors, so you can still kind of see what's going on outside. Alex casually asked,
where's the hard case?
And we're in the midst of Jay Park, so I couldn't give any sort of verbal reaction. I was like, I think I muttered under my breath, oh, it's at the coffee shop. And then we sat down. I was like, here, just use my contacts. And he took the contacts, started shooting with that. I set up the camera gear. It honestly had me shook. I was like, oh man, like, not only is it not at the coffee shop, which is a pretty safe place, it's now in a cab. I paid in cash. I have no receipt, and I have no way of tracking this. This all happened while we were in front of Jay Park, and he was like giving his first answer. And then honestly, like, Alex kind of calmed my nerves. He was like, just focus on the interview. LOL. Honestly, I read that and I was like, you're right. I just need to like tune back in. I need to be focused on this. So after the interview ended, which actually went really well, Jay is like a super articulate dude, great point of view. We went and filed a police report, and time was running down. We were getting to a point where our flight was going to be at 8:30, and it was an hour and a half to get there. The police report obviously put us closer to 6 p.m. And on top of that, when you start adding in like travel time, rush hour, we almost didn't make it. But on the way to the airport, we were thinking to ourselves, man, what just happened? So I just busted out the recorder, the mics, and we just started talking about it. Just trying to figure out where it all went wrong.
where to begin? It's been a interesting few hours.
Let me start because it was kind of my fuck up, right? So, this is our last day in Seoul, and we had one last story that was supposed to take place at 3 p.m. got pushed back to 4 p.m. Flight was at 8:30, so it was kind of cutting it close. And as we got the ball rolling for the day, we went for lunch, whatever. We had to bring all our stuff with us. We left our baggage with some friends. And I thought I'd be a good friend and tell Alex that he could go shopping and I would take his hard case that had all his camera gear in there, like Sony A7R2, Nikon F5, bunch
all
of lenses.
The lenses for both bodies.
15 rolls of film.
15 rolls of film, half of which have photos on them.
Yes. So I took a meeting just by myself, and Alex went shopping. Like I said, I was like, I'll be a good buddy and I'll take your hard case for you.
When keeping it real goes wrong.
Yeah. And then on the way to the story, I put it in the back trunk, which I actually thought twice. I was like, why don't I just put it in the back seat, and just like, it'll always be there. And then as we started going as the taxi started taking off to go to the spot I was doing the story at, we hit traffic. It was kind of raining out, drizzling. So everything was to a crawl. I started getting a little bit antsy because I didn't want to be late. Because if I was going to be late, then it would creep into the interview time, which would mean we'd be late for the flight. Lo and behold, get to the spot, still kind of flustered, get out, pay in cash, forget to take the hard case out. We start settling. I was like, where's the hard case?
In cash, and you also didn't get a receipt.
Didn't get a receipt.
Or anything.
Yeah, just threw my money down, and I was like, got out of there. Alex was like, where's the hard case? And I was like, no word of a lie. I was like, fuck.
Well, it was also awkward because it was happening quickly because you were arriving and then Jay was getting there early. So as the minute you're walking in, he's kind of like, okay, like where, are we getting started? And
then already he was asking how long this isn't gonna take too long, is it?
Right.
And then already that's like, okay. I have to say, before I asked Alex how he felt, he was incredibly composed to the point where I couldn't get a read. I was like, what is going on right now? What was going on through your mind?
I think that it was like as soon as he arrived, I mentally kind of like when those things happen, whenever we go in production, I just kind of like turn game time on, So in a way, like I'm singularly focused on getting it done, getting it right, and kind of like winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was like, I think I was shook for about 3 minutes because at first I thought I had left it at the cafe that I came from, but now I realized, oh no, it's actually in the cab, and arguably the cab's even worse because it's obviously. I don't think that's
I don't know if that's debatable. I think.
You mean
I think the cab is worse.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it is worse. Yeah, the cab's definitely worse. Who knows where it is in Seoul right now? Yeah, so we got through the interview. At least the interview went amazing.
I think in that moment, you kind of have to make a game time decision to either like get held up on that, which you can't really control in that moment, and basically risk ruining the whole reason why you lost the suitcase in the first place and kind of fucking up the interview by being flustered about it, or just being like, all right, we'll deal with this later. He's sitting here waiting to be interviewed. We got to look like we know what we're doing.
I was listening to him and then realizing where it actually was. And I found myself checking out of the interview and I was like, shit, this can't happen. Like I need to check back in. So I was just like, put the phone down, flip it over.
Not to my credit, I think when I was first looking for the suitcase and you didn't have it, and then you kind of like looked a little bit uncertain for a minute, I thought to myself, oh, maybe he just left it at the cafe, so it's not that big of a deal. I didn't realize until like your first question in, and I was looking at you, and you were kind of like doing that thing where you like are sort of mad at yourself inside, and then we started texting like sort of quietly, and you were like, it was in the taxi,
and I have no receipt,
and I was like, oh. But I didn't. But then I could tell that like. He was pretty sharp, right? So like if you were kind of like texting the whole time, it was going to be a bad look.
Yep.
And the interview needed to go well, so I didn't want you to be worried the whole time. So that's why I was like, I'll figure it out. Just focus on this right now.
Yeah.
When you were in the interview that you asked the first question, is that when you realized that it was in the taxi?
Yes. And then
so when I first asked you, when you first got there,
yeah.
You were like thinking, oh, I left it at the restaurant.
At the cafe,
At the cafe.
And at the cafe, I knew where it was, and that was a pretty dead cafe. And like, I don't think anyone would have jacked it. But
when you were in the middle of the interview, that's when it hit you
at the very
where
beginning,
it actually was.
And I was like, holy. Because then if you think about it, if you really think about it, that like it's who knows where it is in Seoul right now, and there's no receipt.
Did everything start to register all at once? Like, were you thinking, was it like, oh, it's in the taxi, shit, and I paid in cash, oh shit, and I didn't get a receipt?
Yeah,
like,
everything. It was literally all things. And like I said, if I was more irresponsible with my cash flow, then I would have paid by card and I would have had a receipt.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was like, in that moment, I saw your face and I felt bad for you. You looked so distraught.
Yeah, good thing that Jay didn't notice.
And I know the type of person you are. Like you really get upset about, letting someone else down.
I was beating myself up pretty hard in the interview at the start, but then I was like, dude, I can't. But you were right. The minute you were like, because I read my message, my line message, you're like, yo, just focus on the interview. And then I was like, yeah, you're right.
Well, because it wouldn't have done any good if you'd have just been stressing there. Like, it wasn't going to get the suitcase any faster.
I was like, yo, Jay, we got to reschedule. I'm not in a good state of mind right now.
You know what was so funny? I had this, like, passing thought in my head when I was like, dude, how hilarious would it be if by some reason in this interview it came about and Jay learned that what happened, that you lost my suitcase, and he was like, yo, don't worry about it, I got you, and he like slid us cash to pay for it. Can you imagine? Because like he was talking about like, oh, I take care of family, like I always put on for people, I keep the city on my back, blah 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 blah. I was gonna be like, hey, speaking of holding down your friends and family,
we just lost a few $1,000s worth of camera equipment.
Getting here was quite a chore. I don't know if you could do anything for me.
I think we handled it quite well. Like, I mean, obviously it's all on me, but I think you handled it quite well. We made some pretty quick moves.
The reality is that it doesn't change the situation. And I still kind of feel like they're just objects, expensive objects.
Yo, if you're listening, Sony, we could really go for a handout right now.
Expensive objects, but I mean, what can you do?
I was
stage in the
pretty
game.
happy that you had such a disconnection. I mean, luckily there was nothing. I mean, the film sucks because there's those 5 or 6 rolls that have been shot. But other than that, I think you handled it quite well.
I'm actually really relieved that my contacts wasn't in there.
That's probably the most difficult thing to replace.
That was
right?
what I was like a little bit just personally butthurt about. But then I realized it was in my bag, and I was like, oh my God.
But what's also funny too is that I immediately offered up my T2 to shoot with when you had your
when
T3
I had it sitting in there.
Yeah.
But it's okay because before you arrived, I was thinking, hey, maybe it would be cool to shoot only with my contacts. But then I remembered last night I put that turquoise lomography roll in, and I was like, well, this is going to be whack. So
it kind of worked out.
Yeah, it kind of worked out.
So it's funny because there's so many things that led up to this moment. The reason I paid in cash was because I was so deliberate in making sure I had cash on me so that I could pay for cabs. And had I just let my cash run out, I would have paid with credit card, and it would have been that much easier to get a receipt, and I would have had the license plate number and all that. So
we finished the interview early.
Right?
Yeah.
And
then we would have been doing great for time. We would have been like chilling right now.
Probably getting a drink at the
Going to the
lounge.
airport, chilling, like, doing a little work action, drinking a little bit, high-fiving, like, man, great interview, guys. But we ended up leaving the interview, stressing out, trying to figure it out, walking to the closest police station, spending 45 minutes there, filing a report.
That wasn't easy either. Luckily, one guy spoke decent English.
Yeah, and then it was like they had us write down the details of the lost suitcase on like some notebook paper first. And then I think when they realized, we wanted to file a report, then we had to fill out like formal paperwork.
And double up basically what you had already told them.
We had to write it like 3 times.
Yeah. Well, what's the moral of the story?
Don't trust Eugene with your equipment.
Don't trust Eugene with your equipment.
But it was funny because actually when you said that earlier, I was thinking like, because I'm usually fairly protective of it. And then I was thinking like, if there's anyone I would trust like to be responsible for it, it would be you, Eugene.
Yeah, that's why I was so disappointed with myself.
Because you're pretty good about like tracking the small, like things that otherwise, like I would, for example, would forget. Like I'm more afraid of myself leaving something in a trunk in a taxi than I am you almost.
Yeah. No, the moral of the story is keep your eye on the prize, kids.
And don't leave your suitcase with Eugene.